The West has a long memory for violence, and a short one for the men who survive it. Elias Kane had been famous once. Famous in the way only dangerous men get famous. His name was plastered on wanted posters across 6 territories. His face was known in every saloon from the dusty plains of Texas to the mountains of Montana. They said he was the fastest gun anyone had ever seen. The deadliest man anyone had ever crossed. But that was 20 years ago. Now he was 61 years old. In the cold mornings, his hands shook. An old wound had left his right eye half blind. His horse, once a powerful stallion, was slower than he liked. And his name on a wanted poster? It meant nothing anymore. Because nobody remembered the name. He rode into the town of Laredo Flats, New Mexico, on a Wednesday afternoon. The dust kicked up around his horse's hooves, settling on the quiet street. Nobody looked up. That was new. That used to never happen. He found the cheapest room at the cheapest boarding house, paying for 1 week with the last of his money. He sat on the edge of the lumpy bed in the small, dim room and looked at his hands for a long time. These hands had done things he could not take back. Things he had spent 2 decades trying not to think about after the sun went down. But he was thinking about them now. He was thinking about all of it. Because Elias Kane was dying. The doctor back in Santa Fe had told him 4 weeks ago. Something in his chest, a creeping shadow that could not be fixed or slowed. 3 months. Maybe 4. Probably 3. He had ridden out of Santa Fe that same afternoon with no plan, no destination. Just the horse, the road, and the crushing weight of everything he had never made right. He had one thing left to do. One promise he had made 20 years ago. And broken 20 years ago. To a woman named Clara Holt. And to the daughter she had been carrying when he rode away, leaving nothing but dust and empty words in his wake. He had told Clara he would come back. He had sworn he would be different. He had told her a lot of things. Then he had ridden away and never returned. Because coming back required being a different man, and back then he hadn't known how. He wasn't sure he wanted to. Now he knew. He just had 3 months to prove it. At the boarding house, he asked the keeper about Clara Holt. The woman, her face a roadmap of hard years, looked at him carefully, her eyes lingering on the scars that crisscrossed his face. Clara Holt, she said, her voice low, has been Clara Reeves for 15 years. She married a good man, Arthur Reeves. He passed away 2 years ago. She lives out on the East Road with her daughter. Elias felt a knot tighten in his gut. He had to ask, how old is the daughter? The woman paused, wiping a cup with a faded cloth. 19. Elias sat with that for a moment, the number echoing in the quiet kitchen. 19 years old. He had missed every single one of them. Her first steps, her first words, every birthday, every scraped knee, a whole life lived without him. He cleared his throat, the sound rough. What is her name? The woman looked at him for a long, searching moment, as if weighing the man before her against the ghost of his past. Then she said, her name is Elias. Her mother named her Elias, after her father, the man who never came back. Elias Kane sat very still in that boarding house kitchen. The air grew thick, heavy. He felt the full, suffocating weight of 20 years land on him all at once, pressing the breath from his lungs. His own name, given to the child he abandoned. A living reminder of his failure. The next morning, he rode out to the East Road. The sun was climbing, casting long shadows across the land. He sat on his slow horse outside the gate of a small, clean farm. A well-tended garden, a sturdy fence, a plume of smoke rising from the chimney. It was a picture of peace, a life he had no part in building. For a long time he just sat there, a relic from another era staring at a world that had moved on without him. He almost turned around. 3 times, his hands tightened on the reins, ready to pull his horse away and ride back into the oblivion he came from. What right did he have to disturb this peace? Then, the door of the farmhouse opened. A young woman came out onto the porch. She was dark-haired, her posture straight and proud, her eyes were sharp, intelligent. She looked at him the way her mother used to look at him, like she could see straight through whatever lie he was pretending to be, right down to the rotten core. She shielded her eyes from the sun. Can I help you? Her voice carried on the wind, clear and steady. He swallowed, his throat dry as the dust on the road. My name is Elias Kane. She went very still, her hand dropping to her side. The name hung in the air between them, a tangible thing, a ghost story come to life. He spoke again, the words tumbling out, raw and unplanned. I know I have no right to be here. I know I have no right to ask anything of you. He took a ragged breath. I'm dying. The doctor gave me 3 months. He looked down at his trembling hands, then back at her. I spent 20 years being the wrong kind of man. The only kind I knew how to be. I would like to spend these last 3 months being a different one. If you'll let me. The young woman, his daughter, Elias, looked at him for a long time. The wind moved through the tall grass between them, a soft, whispering sigh. A hawk turned slow, lazy circles in the vast blue sky above. The world held its breath. Then she spoke. My mother is inside. Her voice was even, giving nothing away. You should talk to her first. She turned toward the door. I'll make coffee. And with that, she went back inside, leaving him alone in the quiet morning. Elias Kane sat on his slow horse at the gate of that small, clean farm. And he felt something he had not felt in 20 years. Something that didn't have a clean name, something tangled with regret and a sliver of impossible hope. But it felt like the very beginning of one. He dismounted slowly, his old joints protesting. His hands were shaking again. But not from the cold this time. He opened the gate. And he walked toward the door. Clara Reeves was 52 years old, and she looked it. Not in a diminished way, but in the way of someone who has lived fully and honestly, every year visible and accounted for. She was sitting at the kitchen table when Elias came through the door, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup. Her eyes found his face immediately and did not look away. Elias stood in the doorway, his hat in his hands. He had faced down dangerous men in 6 territories, but he had never once been as afraid as he was right now. Clara looked at him for a long time. Then she said, You look terrible. Elias replied, I have been better. Sit down, she commanded. He sat. The young woman, his daughter, put coffee in front of him. She sat in the corner and watched with those sharp, seeing eyes. Why now? Clara asked. Elias said, Because I am dying. Clara's voice was steady. So it took dying to bring you back. Yes, Elias said. He didn't make excuses. He had decided on the road here that he wouldn't make excuses. The least he owed her was honesty without decoration. Clara looked at him steadily. I waited for you for 3 years. I told Elias every night that her father was coming back. I stopped telling her when she was 4, because she started asking questions I could not answer. Elias said nothing. There was nothing to say to that. Clara continued, Arthur Reeves was a good man. He raised your daughter like his own. He never once made her feel like she was less than completely wanted. He was everything you were not. Elias just said, I know. And what do you want from us? Clara asked. Elias looked down at his coffee cup. Nothing. I don't want anything from you. I want to give something. He reached into his coat and put a folded paper on the table. Clara looked at it without touching it. It's a deed, he said. Land outside of Tucson. 200 acres. Good water, clean title. It's in her name. Your daughter's name. I have been carrying it for 6 years, waiting until I had the nerve to bring it. Clara looked at the deed, then back at Elias. You have been carrying this for 6 years? He confirmed, yes. And you waited until you were dying to bring it? Yes, he said again. Clara's voice was a mix of old hurt and weary understanding. Elias Kane, she said, you were always the bravest coward I ever knew. He said nothing, because she was right. From the corner, the young woman spoke quietly. Can I see it? Clara pushed the deed across the table. The young woman picked it up and read it carefully. She set it down and looked directly at Elias. My name is Elias too. He said, I know. That must be strange for you, she observed. He replied, It is the greatest honor anyone has ever done me, and I did nothing to deserve it. She looked at him for a long moment, then asked, What did you want to do? In the 3 months you have, he said, whatever's useful. Fences that need mending. Wood that needs chopping. Whatever this farm needs that I can still do with these hands. He looked at his own hands. They have done a lot of bad things. I would like them to do something good. Before they stop working entirely. Clara looked at her daughter. Her daughter looked back at her. A silent conversation passed between them, the kind only possible for 2 people who have lived so closely. Clara looked back at Elias. The south fence has been down since Arthur died. I haven't had the hands to fix it, Elias said. I will start tomorrow. Clara nodded. She picked up her coffee cup. You can sleep in the barn. Supper is at 6. I don't want the past in my house. But I will not turn away a man who needs a place to do something good before he goes. Elias stood up. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me yet, Clara warned. There is something you don't know, something that changes things. She looked at her daughter, who nodded once. Clara faced Elias. There is a man in this town. His name is Dutch Carey. He has been pressuring me to sell this farm for 8 months. He wants the water rights. He has 3 men who do his persuading for him. Arthur's death was not entirely natural. We believe that. We cannot prove it. And Dutch Carey knows we can't prove it. He has been getting closer and more dangerous every month. She looked at Elias directly. I am not telling you this so you will fix it. I am telling you this so you know what you are walking into. So you can make an informed decision about whether you still want to sleep in the barn. Elias looked at Clara. He looked at his daughter. His daughter was looking back at him with those sharp, seeing eyes. Waiting. Not with hope, exactly, but with the careful, measured attention of someone who has learned not to invest hope in things before they have proven themselves. Elias picked up his hat. I will start on the south fence tomorrow. Point me toward Dutch Carey's operation when I am done. He walked out to the barn and lay on his back in the hay, looking up at the ceiling. 3 months, a dying man, a daughter who did not know him, a woman whose trust he had destroyed 20 years ago, and a dangerous man who had already killed once and would kill again. He had spent 20 years being the fastest gun anyone had ever seen. He had 3 months to find out if that was worth anything, used in the right direction, for the right people. For the first time in his life, he closed his eyes. And for the first time in 20 years, he slept without dreaming about the things he had done. Thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe for the final part of this story. He started on the south fence at sunrise. His hands shook in the cold morning air, but he worked through it, post by post, rail by rail. Young Elias brought him coffee mid-morning, watching him work. You are good with your hands, the boy said. The man replied, his voice a low rumble, I used to be better. Later, Clara came out. She stood there for a moment, the wind catching a loose strand of her hair. Were you ever going to come back? Before the dying? He was quiet for a long moment, the rhythmic sound of his hammer the only thing breaking the silence. I told myself yes for a long time, he finally said. I told myself I was waiting until I was different enough, better enough, safe enough to be around. She looked at him, her gaze unwavering. And were you? He shook his head, a wry, sad smile touching his lips. No, not yet became 20 years. Clara's voice was soft, but carried the weight of memory. Arthur used to say the only difference between a man who changes and a man who does not is that the man who changes stops waiting to feel ready and just starts. Elias, who had been listening from the porch, looked at his mother. She turned and walked back to the house, leaving the 2 men alone with her words hanging in the air. The man turned back to the fence. He worked until the light failed, until his muscles screamed in protest. He had never in his life worked a full day building something. He was surprised by how it felt. Not just the ache in his bones, but a quiet satisfaction, a sense of purpose he hadn't known in decades. On the 3rd day, a shadow fell over his work. Dutch Carey rode up, flanked by 2 men. He was a big man, well-dressed, with the kind of swagger that comes from never being challenged. He glanced at the repaired fence, then his eyes settled on the stranger working it. He turned to Clara, who had come out onto the porch. Who is this? A hand, Clara said, her voice steady. Dutch Carey smiled, a cold, predatory thing. My offer still stands, he said, his voice laced with threat, but it won't stand for much longer. He wheeled his horse around and rode away, his men following like vultures. The dust settled. Clara's voice was barely a whisper. But it carried across the yard, he will come back. The man didn't look up from his work. He just drove another nail home. I know. He paused, his gaze fixed on the horizon where Carey had disappeared. How many men does he have? 6 that we know of, she answered. He nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. Then he picked up another rail and went back to work. The sun beat down. The air was still, and the fence grew longer, stronger, a line drawn in the dust, a line that would have to be defended. What happens when a man who has spent a lifetime running finally decides to stand his ground? What does he have to become to protect the last good thing in his life? This is a story about redemption, about facing the ghosts of the past, and about the quiet courage it takes to build a future, one post at a time. It's about how sometimes the most profound changes don't begin with a grand gesture, but with the simple act of picking up a hammer and starting the work that needs to be done, even when your hands are shaking. It's about a man who stopped waiting to feel ready. If this story resonates with you and you want to see where this path leads, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We're just getting started and you won't want to miss what comes next. Thanks for watching. That evening, young Elias's voice was low, filled with a grim certainty. Dutch Carey killed Arthur. He said it like a final judgment, a truth they couldn't escape. The sheriff, he added, is bought. There's no law coming to help us. The air in the small cabin grew heavy with the words, thick with the smell of dust and fear. They were alone, a tiny island in a sea of corruption. But old Elias, his face etched with the lines of 100 hard seasons, just nodded slowly. He didn't look surprised. He looked tired, but a spark still burned in his eyes. I wrote a letter, he said, his voice a gravelly rumble, 3 weeks ago, to a federal marshal named George Pickett. The name hung in the air, a sliver of hope. He leaned forward, his weathered hands resting on the rough-hewn table. I know Dutch Carey, from 12 years ago. Same thing, different town. His gaze was distant, lost in a memory they couldn't see. The marshal, he's coming, within 1 month. 1 month, the words echoed. Young Elias looked at the old man, his own fear warring with a flicker of newfound respect. You have to stay alive for 1 month. That was the challenge, the impossible task laid before them. Old Elias's lips curved into a faint, grim smile. That is the plan, he confirmed. But Clara, who had been silent until now, her hands twisting in her apron, spoke up. Her voice was taut, stretched thin with worry. Dutch Carey will not wait. She knew the man's cruelty. He was a predator who enjoyed the hunt, and he wouldn't be patient. Old Elias pushed his chair back. His movements were slow but deliberate, each one carrying the weight of his decision. Tomorrow, he announced, I ride into town. A hush fell over the room. I will let Dutch Carey know who I am. He paused, letting the statement sink in. I will make him afraid enough to wait. It was a bold, dangerous declaration. A gamble with the highest stakes. Clara's breath caught in her throat. And if he does not wait, if your plan fails? Elias looked down at his own hands. They were gnarled, calloused from a lifetime of labor, of building and fixing. And if he does not wait, if your plan fails? Elias looked down at his own hands. They were gnarled, calloused from a lifetime of labor, of building and fixing. But there was a memory in them, a different kind of knowledge that lay dormant. He straightened up, his resolve hardening his features. Either way, the fence is fixed. The deed is in her name, and I am here. His eyes found Clara's across the dimly lit room, and his expression softened. The hardness melted away, replaced by a deep, ancient regret. I should have been here 20 years ago. The words were an apology for a lifetime of absence. I cannot give you those 20 years back, but I can give you this month. All of it, whatever it costs. The promise was a gift, a shield he was placing around them. He was offering not just his protection but his very life. To buy them a chance at a future he had long since forfeited for himself. The weight of his sacrifice filled the silence. He was a man making his final stand, not just against the villain, but against his own past. Clara held his gaze for a long moment. The fear was still in her eyes, but it was joined by something else now, a quiet strength, a mirroring of his own resolve. She broke the spell, her voice steady and practical, a return to the rhythms of their life. Finish your supper, she said simply. You have an early morning. It was an acceptance. A command. A prayer. It meant, I understand. It meant be careful. It meant, I understand. It meant be careful. It meant, come back. As Elias picked up his fork, the simple act of eating became a preparation for war, a final, quiet moment of peace before the coming storm. The morning would bring a confrontation, a test of will between an old man with nothing left to lose and a tyrant who believed he owned the world. And in that small, quiet cabin, a family steeled itself for the fight of their lives. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe for more content like this. We'll see you in the next one. He rode into Laredo Flats alone, the sun just a faint promise in the cold morning light. His horse moved with a slow, tired gait, each step a quiet punctuation mark on the dusty main street. He found Dutch Carey's saloon easily enough. It was the biggest, loudest building in town, even at this early hour. He dismounted, tied his horse to the rail, and pushed through the swinging doors. The room went quiet for a beat, then the low murmur of conversation started up again. He walked straight to the back table where a large man with a slick smile was holding court. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He just said, My name is Elias Kane. It was like a switch had been flipped. The air in the saloon changed. Dutch Carey's smile didn't falter, but something behind his eyes shifted, hardened. The laughter around the table died. Carey leaned forward, his voice a low growl. Elias Kane, now that's a name I know. Elias met his gaze, his own expression unreadable. I want you to leave the Reeves farm alone. Clara and her daughter. Leave them be. Carey chuckled, a humorless sound that didn't reach his cold eyes. He spread his hands on the table, a picture of mock innocence. And if I don't? What's a man like you going to do about it? This was the moment. Elias leaned in just a fraction, his voice dropping so only Carey could hear. I know what you did in Arizona 12 years ago. I know what you did to Arthur Reeves 2 years ago. And I've written all of it down, every last detail. He let that sink in for a moment. That document is with a federal marshal. A man named George Pickett, and he's writing here right now. Carey's smirk finally vanished. A flicker of something, was it fear, crossed his face before he masked it with anger. Elias pressed his advantage. You have, maybe 3 weeks before he arrives. You can use that time to cause more trouble for the Reeves farm. A lot of trouble, I'm sure. Or you can use that time to make arrangements. To be somewhere else entirely when Marshal Pickett gets here. Carey sneered, trying to regain his footing. You're a dying man, Kane, coming in here making threats. Elias gave a slow, deliberate nod. Yes, I am. He paused, letting the weight of his words fill the space between them. And that's why you should listen. Dying men are the most dangerous kind. We have nothing left to lose. You, on the other hand, Elias gestured around the opulent saloon. At the men who watched him with nervous respect, you have quite a lot. With that, he pushed his chair back and stood up. He picked up his worn hat from the table, dusting it off with a steady hand he didn't quite feel. 3 weeks, Mr. Carey. He turned and walked out of the saloon, the silence following him like a shadow. He didn't look back. Once he was back on his horse, riding out of town, the facade crumbled. His hands started shaking, a violent tremor that had nothing to do with the morning cold. It was the adrenaline, the fear, the sheer force of will it had taken to face that man and not flinch. He had gambled everything on a single, desperate bluff. A bluff that could get him, and the people he was trying to protect, killed. But Dutch Carey didn't come that day. Or the next, or the one after that. The days stretched into a week, each sunset bringing a small measure of relief, each sunrise a fresh wave of anxiety. Clara and her daughter, young Elias as he'd come to call her, went about their chores on the farm. Their resilience a quiet strength that shamed his own fear. He watched them, a silent guardian, his rifle never far from his side. Then, on the 7th day, news came from a neighbor. Carey's saloon was closed up, dark and empty. He was gone. Vanished. Direction unknown. That evening, as they sat around the small supper table, the lamplight casting warm shadows on their faces, Clara told him the news. He just nodded, pushing the food around on his plate. Pickett will still come, he said, his voice raspy. The information I gave him is enough. Carey won't get far. The law will find him eventually. Young Elias, who had been watching him with an unnerving intensity, spoke up. Her voice was clear and steady, far older than her years. You called his bluff. He looked up from his plate, meeting her gaze. He managed a faint, tired smile. I gave him a choice. Men like Dutch Carey, they always choose themselves. Always, over everything and everyone else. It's both their greatest strength and their only real weakness. He weighed his empire against his freedom, and he chose to run. She considered his words for a long moment, her expression serious. Then she said something that hit him harder than any bullet ever could. You're not that man anymore. It wasn't meant as comfort. It wasn't pity or absolution. She said it simply, as a statement of fact. Like observing that the sky is blue or the fire is hot, he felt a familiar ache in his chest. The weight of his past, of the man he used to be, was a constant companion. I'm trying not to be, he said, the words barely a whisper. She shook her head, a small, firm motion. No, you're not. There's a difference. And in that small kitchen, in the quiet sincerity of a child's eyes, Elias Kane finally understood. It wasn't about trying anymore, it was about being. He wasn't the man who rode with outlaws in Arizona. He wasn't the man driven by revenge or haunted by ghosts. He was the man who sat at this table, protecting this family. He was the man who had faced down his own demons in a dusty saloon, not with a gun, but with a choice to be better, And in the end, that was the only choice that truly mattered. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. We'll see you in the next one. 3 weeks later, Marshal George Pickett rode into Laredo Flats. He came to the farm and took Elias's full testimony. Every detail of Arizona. Every detail of Arthur Reeves. He told Elias that Dutch Carey had been apprehended up in Colorado. He wasn't going anywhere. Pickett looked at Elias and said, "You did a good thing here, Kane." Elias just shook his head and replied, "I did a late thing." The marshal nodded. Late is better than never. Elias lasted 6 more weeks on the farm. In those weeks he became a whirlwind of activity, a man driven by a purpose he'd long forgotten. He mended everything that needed mending, from the creaky porch steps to the sagging fence line that had so troubled Arthur. He chopped enough wood to last them 2 winters, stacking it neatly by the side of the house, a fortress against the cold to come. His most important work, though, was with his daughter. He spent hours teaching young Elias what he knew about horses. He showed her how to read their moods, how to groom them until their coat shone, how to sit a saddle with a quiet confidence that made the animal feel like a partner, not a servant. She learned fast. She had his hands, he told her once, gentle but firm. She just smiled and said, "I know. Mama always said so." In the evenings, he would sit on the porch with Clara. They didn't talk about the past much. The years of silence and pain were a chasm too wide to cross with mere words. What they had instead was the present. It was small and quiet and real. A shared cup of coffee as the sun went down. The comfortable silence between 2 people who had seen too much to need idle chatter. That quiet reality, he realized, was worth more than all the gold he'd ever chased. On the last morning, he woke before the first hint of dawn painted the sky. He made his way to the barn, the familiar scent of hay and leather, a comforting presence in the pre-dawn chill. He sat down and, by the faint light of a single lantern, wrote a letter to his daughter. He didn't fill it with apologies. He knew she had heard enough of those empty words that did little to heal the wounds he'd inflicted. Instead, he wrote about what he had seen in her over those 6 short weeks. He wrote about the way she worked, with a tireless determination that put him to shame. He wrote about the way she thought, carefully, and with a wisdom far beyond her years. He wrote about the way she gave people the chance to prove themselves before deciding what they were, a grace he had never possessed. He wrote, "You got none of that from me. You got that from your mother and from Arthur Reeves. But I want you to know I saw it, and it was the best thing I ever saw." Then he wrote about his promise. "I kept my promise. Late, and badly at first, but I kept it. That is all I have. I hope it is worth something." He folded the letter carefully and tucked it under the barn door, right where young Elias would find it when she came to do her morning chores. Then he sat back in the soft hay, the lantern flickering beside him, and closed his eyes. He was not afraid. For the first time in 61 long, hard years, a profound peace settled over him. He was tired, yes, and he was finished. But he was at peace with who he was. Not the broken, haunted shape he had been for most of his life, but the man he had managed to become at the very end. The man who finally understood that it's at the end when it truly counts. The man who stopped waiting to feel ready and just started. If this story moved you, hit that like button right now. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that it is never too late. Not ever. Not even at the end. Subscribe and turn on the bell for a new Western story every single week. We want to hear from you. So leave a comment and tell us what moment hit you the hardest. Was it the mended fence? Was it the daughter's name? Was it the final letter? We read every single comment because this channel exists because of you. God bless. We will see you in the next story.